It's time to make it. Just give it a try. 'Cause you can make it like the old fat guy.
Welcome to another episode of You Can Make It with David Farrell, the old fat guy. Today I'm going to make something that's great to do in the late summer and early fall, and that's use all the fresh vegetables that are available to make salsa. Now, I'm going to make my own version of salsa, which is Old Fat Guy or OFG salsa, and it really is very easy to make. The only hard part of making salsa is all the chopping. You got to chop lots of tomatoes, you got to chop lots of peppers, onions. Now, some people just cut them in chunks and throw them in a food processor and give them a few pulses. It works, but I don't like the textures much. I like the nice cubed stuff up, so I do it all by hand. You're not going to have to watch me chop everything. I did it before I got here. I'm just going to show you how to make the salsa with the chopped vegetables. Now, the ingredients for salsa are pretty standard, but you need to know that salsa is just Spanish for sauce. So if you go to Mexico, you're going to get a totally different taste. It's going to be all kinds of different things because it just means sauce. This is a North American style salsa that we're used to. Now, the ingredients all just get put into a big pot and brought to a boil. Now, I like to use my big electric skillet here because it sort of keeps control of the temperature for me. But just a big pot on the stove will work well too. Now, we're going to start off with 1,500 milliliters or 6 cups of coarsely chopped tomatoes. Now, you can use canned diced tomatoes, but they're a little more liquid and you'll have to boil your tomatoes and salsa longer to get a good consistency. But these are hand-chopped fresh tomatoes, 1,500 milliliters or 6 cups. We'll put them in. And then sweet peppers. Now, you can use green peppers, red peppers, yellow peppers, whatever you've got. I like to use a mixture because that adds more color to my salsa. And what I have here is 1,200 milliliters or about 4, close to 5 cups. So just under 5 cups of sweet peppers, all diced up. And then, of course, salsa generally is a little spicy, so I've added some jalapeno. And what I did was I took 257 grams, or about half a pound of jalapenos, cut the tops off, took the seeds and membranes out, and then chopped them up. And that left me with a little over a cup, or 250 milliliters of chopped jalapeno. And we'll just add that. And then we need 500 milliliters, or 2 cups of chopped onion. We'll just throw that into the mix. Now, I have a little secret ingredient I'm trying here and like myself, and that is rhubarb. I just put a cup and a half or 375 milliliters of chopped rhubarb in. I find it gives it a taste that you can't quite pick out, but I like. So we'll add that to it. Then you need some tart in your salsa. So what I have here is 500 milliliters or 2 cups of cider vinegar. And to kick up the tomato flavor a bit, I use tomato paste. And I have a 156 milliliter can, which is about 5 ounces of tomato paste. So we'll just put the tomato paste in to the salsa. There we go. Now you need some seasonings and spices to make salsa. So what I have here are 4 cloves of garlic, all chopped up. I have 30 milliliters of sugar. I have 15 milliliters of kosher salt. I have 10 milliliters of paprika and 5 milliliters of oregano. And I'll just scrape all that in there. Yeah, I got a little bit of the tomato salsa there, so I'll put that in. Okay. So, now that we've got it all in the pot, that's everything. It's just a matter of stirring it together. Now, don't worry about getting it too well stirred at this point because you're going to be stirring it lots for the next hour. And there we go, that's good enough for now. And what we're going to do is bring this to a boil. And once it gets to a boil, I'm going to bring the heat down a little bit and let it simmer for an hour. And you want to stir it about every 5 to 10 minutes during that hour to make sure it doesn't stick. And then we'll come back and see if it's thick enough. So I'll just bring this to a boil and simmer it for an hour, and I'll see you then. The salsa has been simmering for about 30 minutes, and I've got my water canner out. And the water canner is just a big pot you use to sterilize your jars for canning in and to boil the canned product so that it is sterilized and you can store it for a long period of time. So I filled it just up to this line on the canner. That tells you where to fill it to with water. And I've put it on the heat. But before it gets hot, I like to take the jars I'm going to use. Now, we should get about 6 1-pint or 500 milliliter jars from that. But I always do one extra jar just in case there's some extra. And just put the jars in the rack that comes with your canner. Now, the reason I leave the water cold and put it on and do this before the water heats up is if you push that in, you can put the jars in and fill them with water and turn them over without burning your hand. So we'll just put all 7 jars in the canner. Now, the sad part is they're going to float up to the top anyway as the water boils, but it gives us a bit better chance of getting them out clean. So we'll just put all 7 jars in. Now, we want to bring the water in the canner to a boil and let it boil for about 10 minutes to sterilize the jars. And we'll do that, like I say, during the last half hour of heating of the salsa. By turning them over, when you lift them out, the water falls out instead of you having to empty them. So there we go. They're in. I'll just put the lid on the canner and we'll let it come to a boil, and I'll see you when the salsa's thickened up and finished its 1-hour simmer. I checked my salsa after an hour to see if it was thick enough, and it was a little thin for my liking. It was a bit too much liquid, so I gave it another 10 minutes. Now, it's really a matter of personal taste how thick you like your salsa. You can cook it really thick, but I like a little bit of liquid around my vegetables, just like that. And that's the way I like it. You can cook a little bit more if you want, but more important than the looks is the taste, because as it cooks down, it also concentrates the flavors. So it's important you just take a taste and make sure it's the way you want it to be. That's just perfect. Got a little hint of a nice, rich, bitter flavor from the rhubarb. Nice vinegary taste from the cider vinegar. Just enough heat from the jalapenos to give you a warm feeling in your mouth. The peppers make it just incredible. And of course, the tomato background is what makes salsa what it is. Now, this heat level is about what you would get if you bought a medium salsa in the store. You could double it up easily if you like a really hot salsa. Just put twice the amount of jalapeno peppers in. If you like it milder, just put half the amount of jalapeno peppers in. But this is about medium, just the way I like it. Now, my jars aren't boiling yet, so I'm just going to turn the heat off this and let it sit until they've been boiled for 10 minutes, and I'll come back and talk to you again. The salsa has thickened up as much as we want, and the water's been boiling on the jars for 10 minutes. So we're ready to take the jars out of the water canner because they're now sterilized. I'm just going to grab some oven mitts because it's going to be hot, and we're going to pull them out. Now, there's 2 handles that stick up on the canning rack to let you just lift up. And there you go. There's 7 sterilized jars. Perfect. Now, do not take the water off the boil. We're going to be putting stuff back in there in a second. But now that we got the jars off, we're just going to might want to use one of the oven mitts and pull them off and stand them up. We're ready to start filling them. we go. So we got the jars off. Now, a canning jar is made out of 3 parts. There's the jar, there's the rings that go on the top of the jar, and there's the sealing lids. Now the sealing lids can only be used once because they have a sealing compound around there. And once it's been sealed, it doesn't work again. But it works better if it's a little warm. So I like to take a little bit of water out of the canner and just throw the sealing lids in it just to warm up, and it makes them seal better. So now we have our salsa, we have our jars, we've got the sealing lids. So what we're going to do is just move this like this and start filling our jars. Now just take a jar, and this is what they call a a canning funnel. It's made to have a base that just fits inside a standard canning jar, and you just take some of the salsa and put it through the funnel. And you fill it not quite full, just almost to the top. There we go. So overfill that a little bit. So we'll just take a spoon to take some out. And the reason you don't want to fill it quite to the top is because you want to be able to make sure there's no air bubbles that form around the side of the nice thick salsa. So we're just going to take a knife and push it around all the edges to make sure there's no air bubbles. Now you want to leave about a ½ inch of airspace on the top. And in most canning jars, they give you a ridge to show where that is. This just needs a little bit more to get to it. The reason for that airspace is we're going to be putting it back into the hot boiling water in the canner to sterilize it. And that causes some expansion, and you need the airspace to allow for it. So we'll just take one of our warmed lids, line it up on the center of it. Now you got to be careful if there's any stuff on there. Use a paper towel to wipe it clear, but I got that one pretty clean. And screw the lid on it. And just keep doing that until you've filled all the jars. Okay, I'm just finishing off the last jar here. I'm only going to get 5 out of this batch. How much you get out of the batch depends how much you boil it down, but 5 to 6 is sort of normal. So we'll just put the last lid on it. Again, if it was any of on top, wipe it down with a paper towel before you seal it. Put the last one on and seal it up. So now what we're going to do is put these back in the boiling water. I'm going to take the rack, and the idea is you want to boil these for 15 minutes each, and that just makes sure they're sterilized. Now, I live at high altitude. If you live up in the mountains like I do, give it 20 minutes because the water boils at a lower temperature. If you're any place at regular altitude, 15 minutes is fine. So we'll just take the lid off, and we'll lift our rack up and just set it into the boiling water. And you want it to come back to a boil, which should just take a couple of minutes, and then let it boil for 15 minutes at regular altitude or 20 minutes at high altitude, and it will be finished canning. I'll talk to you then. So the canned salsa has been sitting in the water canner for 20 minutes at a boil. Remember, only 15 if you're at lower altitude. And now's the time to take it out. Just turn the cooktop off there and grab the 2 handles and lift the jars out. Now, it's important you keep them upright at this point. Don't worry if it tips over a little bit or whatever. But leave them upright and put them on the counter. The reason for that is, the way you know they're sealed is the sealer lids that you put on there will go pop and curl down instead of be popped up over the next 24 hours. If they do that, then the jar is sealed and it's fine. If it doesn't do that, you have to use it within the next couple of weeks if you keep it in the refrigerator. So there's the jars done. And we'll just set them to a side here because there's always a little bit left over. I got about 5.5 jars, so there's always a little bit left over, so we have some to try. And you got to try everything you cook. It's just the way it is. So first, we're just going to try it a little bit with a spoon, just by itself, and see how it tastes. The tomato sweet is just perfectly balanced by the vinegar and the rhubarb. You would never know there's rhubarb in here, but there's a real richness to the flavor you don't get if you don't use the rhubarb. It's got just a nice amount of pepper. This heat is not enough to cause you any pain, but definitely give you some warmth in your mouth. This is a great salsa. But I find to really try a salsa, you got to try it with a nacho chip. So let's see how it goes on a chip. Even better. Got a perfect consistency, and it goes so well with the nacho chip. I will warn you about making this, though. You might never want to buy store-bought again, but it doesn't matter because you can make it.
I have a good woman. I ain't good looking, but I do some cooking. I'm the old fat guy. So use that oven if you want some lovin'. Be like the old fat guy. Be like the old fat guy.